Okay, we're back again and we're going to talk about graphing linear equations in slope-intercept form. If you remember what we discussed on yesterday, we know that slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope, b is your y-intercept. Remember that slope is the number in front of x. It is not x, it is the number in front of x. Okay? For y-intercept, you want to be always, it is always written as a point. In other words, it is 0, comma, b. Okay? Always written as a point. So we got some examples here. We can find the slope in the y-intercept just by looking at the formula in its form, in the slope-intercept form, and line up what is the slope and line up what's the y-intercept. So let's look at a few examples. In problem A, we have y is equal to 3x minus 4. Remember that the slope is the number in front of x. It is not x. So you wouldn't write 3x. You will write 3. And then the y-intercept, you want to make sure that you take the sign that's in front of the number. This tells you whether it's positive or negative. And remember, we're going to write it as a point. So it'll be 0, comma, negative 4. Same thing for the next one. The slope is the number in front of x, so it will be 6.5. And because this doesn't have a b, you can really say this is plus 0. This plus 0 means it has a y-intercept written as the same way as we write a point, 0, comma, 0. In other words, your line goes through your origin. The next problem is y equals negative 1 over 3x plus 4. Negative 1 over 3 is a number, even though it's a fraction, and it's negative. That means it has a negative slope. It is still a number in front of x, so my slope is negative 1 over 3. And my y-intercept is 0, comma, 4. Make sure you put in parentheses around those ordered paragraphs. So that's pretty simple. We got a slope, we got the intercept form. As long as it's y equals, we're good. So let's look at a problem here. And we are going to use slope-intercept form in order to graph it. Step 1 is to mark the y-intercept. Well, that means I need to know what b is. So b, in this case, is 0, comma, 2. And so on my graph, I'm going to go ahead and graph 0, comma, 2. All right, the next step is to write the slope as a fraction. Remember that when we talked about slope is rise over run, it's a fraction. So we want to make sure to rewrite our slope the same way. Well, if we look at our equation, our slope is a number in front of x, so that means it will be a negative 2. So if we want to write that as a fraction, we write negative 2 over 1, because a whole number by itself is automatically over 1. Next, we can use the slope to create points. we can use the slope to create points. Well, how do we do this? Well, first, we start with the y-intercept that's already marked on our graph. Here it is. And our slope tells us to rise 2 and run 1. Now, make sure you remember this negative sign over here. All right, that means that my slope has to be decreasing from left to right. So I'm going to rise 2, 1, 2. Now I need to decide whether I'm going to go left or right. You go right when you know your slope is going to be positive. You go left when your slope is going to be negative. If you can imagine you drawing a line, then you need to be decreasing from left to right. So if I go here, I know I'm going to be decreasing from left to right. And then you keep doing that all the way up. Okay, now that I got all of these drawn and I've gone up as far as I can go, I start back at the y-intercept and I do the same thing going down 2 and go over 1. Down 2, over 1. Because rise, even though the wording says rise, is really your up and down motion. And you want to keep doing that all the way down. And then after you do that, after you've drawn as many points as you can draw, the last step is to draw a line. So I'm going to take my highlighter here, and you should have your handy dandy ruler that we made in class. And yours is probably going to be way straighter than mine. And that should be your line. All right, let's turn over to the next page. All right, graph each slope-intercept equation, then identify the x-intercept, or the 0. Okay, so again, same thing we did on the previous page, nothing different. We're going to look for the slope and the y-intercept, and we remember that the slope is the number in front of x. And since I'm going to be graphing, I'm going to go ahead and write the slope as a fraction. So this one will be 4 over 1. And then my y-intercept has a negative in front of it, or minus sign, which makes a negative. So it becomes 0, negative 4. All right, now let's graph it. First thing we put on the graph is the y-intercept, which is at 0, negative 4. And then the slope told me to rise 4 over 1. So rise 4, 2, 3, 4 over 1. Rise 4, 2, 3, 4 over 1. And you want to keep doing this all the way up. Rise 4 over 1. And go up as far as you can go. This is the last point you can put going up. So now I'm going to start back at the y-intercept, and I'm going to go down this time. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then over 1. And that'll give me a complete set of points for this line. Then you take your highlighter. Oops. Take the highlighter and draw me a line. Or at least I'm going to take my highlighter. You should be having your ruler drawing your line. Okay? Look at the next one. Y equals negative 1/2 x plus 3. Again, a fraction is nothing more than a number, so don't be scared of the fraction, because the slope is always going to be the same thing, the number in front of x, as long as it's in slope-intercept form. So that means my slope is negative 1 over 2. And then my y-intercept is a positive 3, so I write 0, 3. Oops, I almost left one thing out. X-intercept. X-intercept is a place where it crosses the x-axis. So if we look at the x-axis here on our first graph, we can see that it crosses the x-axis here, because here's your x-axis. runs horizontal. So the coordinate for that is 1, comma, 0. Notice for y-intercept, the x has to be 0, and for the x-intercept, the y has to be 0. Okay? All right, starting back over here now. The first thing we need to grab is the y-intercept, which is 0, comma, 3. Okay? And then our slope, make sure you remember that this is negative, so our line has to be going in the negative direction. So I'm going to rise 1 and go over to the left 2, because this direction will make my line negative. Go up 1, over 2, up 1, over 2, up 1, over 2. You want to keep doing this in both directions. So when you finish in one direction, you start back at the y-intercept and you do it going down. Count going down. Down 1, over 2. And once you have completed it, then you can take your ruler and draw a line going through those points. After all, we are dealing with linear functions, and linear functions are lines. Now, if we look for the x-intercept, which is the last thing it asks for, we want to look at the place where the line crosses the y-axis. And you can see here, if you put all your points on your graph like you're supposed to, you can see that there's a point when x is 6. So our coordinate there is 6, comma, 0. All right, let's look at this word problem. Graphing from a verbal description. A linear function g models a relationship in which the dependent variable, it's a key word here, increases 3 units for every 1 unit. For every 1 unit, the independent variable increases. Graph g when g of 0 equals 3. Identify the slope, the y-intercept, and the x-intercept. All right, let's talk about these dependent variables and independent variables. If you remember from our lesson when we first started going over functions, we said that our dependent variable is the y, and our independent variable is the x. So our dependent variable increases 3 units, and our for every 1 unit in the independent variable. So let's remember what slope is. Slope is our change in y over our change in x. So if that is the case, then essentially we're saying slope is y over x. So let's look here again. The relationship in which the dependent variable increases by 3. So my change for y changes 3 times, by 3, plus 3 every time. And then my x changes by 1. So every time my y increases by 3, my x changes by 1. Hopefully that makes sense. So my slope is 3 over 1. And then it told me, if we look here, g of 0 is equal to 3. If you remember, g is a function name, and then inside the parentheses gives you the value of x. So now I have my input, which releases an output. So 3 is my output, which means that is my y. Well, if that's the case, an ordered pair is x comma y, so my y-intercept would be 0 comma 3.